Much for what you do. I saw Tom backstage. Maybe he's wondering. There's Tom. There he is. Tom, thank you for all your leadership and all your hard work. And you know, it's funny when I come and do these events. I always try to check on the news of the day because I try to understand what's going on in the world before. You know, I'll take some questions from reporters. I always try to understand what people are talking about and what the news of the day is. And I saw that I guess Governor Tim Walz did a live stream of a Madden football game, professional football game. Obviously not playing; they were playing video games, and he did it with AOC. And I guess the goal is to try to appeal to the young male vote by playing video games online with AOC. And I don't know who came up with that idea, but I guess afterwards. You know, because Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, they always like to talk about Project 2025, and which, by the way, is a complete dishonest disgrace. Project 2025 has nothing to do with the Trump campaign, and it never has. But set that to the side. He was talking about playbooks and trying to connect that to Project 2025, and he said, yesterday AOC she did very good. She ran a pick six. I think, like, you don't run a pick six. You run the West Coast offense or the spread offense, or the 3-4, the 4-3. Like, it made me realize that I think that even though they say Tim Walz was a college football coach, that I think I know more about football than Tim Walz. And it's appropriate because I think my running mate, Donald J. Trump, knows more about working at McDonald's than Kamala Harris does. But I want to put a couple messages out there because it's really, really important that we get out there and run up the score as much as possible, not just on Election Day, but before Election Day. So last night, did anybody watch the A lot of people. Fantastic. And who's going to vote on Election Day? Great. Okay, it's actually in this room, I'd say about half and half is my best guess. But let's get out there and bank as many votes and run up the score as possible because we're going to make Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States. But we're only going to do it if we actually get out there and vote. And importantly, as you all know better than I do, we have no idea what the weather's going to be like on November the 5th in the state of Wisconsin. So if we can bank as many votes early, we ought to do that. Now, I'm going to make a few requests about how we're going to make Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States before I get on to the why. Now, the how here. There's a website I want everybody to go to. It's called swampthevoteusa.com. And I want you to write that down if you can't remember it, swampthevoteusa.com. On that website, you can check your absentee ballot. You can check how to request an absentee ballot. You can check where you can vote, and you can also check and make sure your registration is up to date. We've got to make sure that we swamp the vote, because if we don't, we're going to have Kamala Harris as President of the United States, and I don't want to have 4 years of a nightmare for the United States of America. I want to get back to the peace and prosperity of Donald J. Trump, so let's get out there and swamp the vote. So I didn't even realize this actually until I looked at what I was going to talk about today. I didn't realize the margin was so small in the state of Wisconsin. This state was decided by 0.63%. That's 20,000 votes. And that could very well be the difference. Frankly, it could be even smaller than that, the difference between President Donald Trump and President Kamala Harris. So here's the second thing I want to ask you to do. We're never going to get honesty from Kamala Harris and the corporate media. They're never going to tell the truth about this campaign or about the condition of the country. But you know who can tell the truth? We can. So take out your phone, take a photo of this event, send it to your buddies, post on social media, do whatever you do, and get the truth about it. Why are you voting for Donald J. Trump? Because I believe that the honest words of 1,000 American patriots is worth far more than the dishonesty of the corporate media and the Kamala Harris campaign. And I'll make the final request here, and that is that I want every single person in this hangar to get out there and vote 10 times. A few of you are like, what? We're Republicans. We only vote once. We do things the legal way. And I'm sure we'll hear and see it in the New York Times tomorrow that J.D. Vance came to Wisconsin and encouraged mass voter fraud in an airport hangar. But here's the legal way to vote 10 times, and that's to take yourself to the polls and take 9 events. We've got all the joy and we're having all the fun on the Donald J. Trump team, and that's a thing to be proud of. But we're also talking about some very serious business for the United States of America. I, for one, would like to raise my children in a country that is not flooded with 25 million illegal aliens. I'd like to raise my children in a country where rich and poor alike can afford to buy groceries at the grocery store because we've got common sense economic policies. I'd like to get back to having a president who unleashes American energy. We're going to drill, baby, drill when Donald J. Trump is president of the United States. And by the way, when we do that, we're going to make the cost of goods cheaper for everybody, whether they work in the energy sector or not. Think about this. If the truck driver delivering the groceries to the grocery store is paying 45% more for diesel, then all of us are going to be paying more for grocery. If the guy delivering the lumber to the job site is paying 40% more for gasoline, then all of us are going to be paying more for that new house. We have got to appreciate that energy is the foundation of the American economy, and we've got an incredible contrast here, a choice for our country to make. Do we want to go with the leadership of Kamala Harris, who is promising and in fact already has done policies that make it harder to buy oil and gas from American citizens? She wants us to buy oil and gas from tin pot dictators all over the world. I want us to buy oil and gas from our own people in our own territory. We got plenty of it right here at home. Let's get it out of the ground and make it into useful stuff. And of course, we've got to get back to common sense economic policies that reward people who create jobs in the United States of America and reward the workers who keep our economy going. We've got to stop with the Kamala Harris approach of paying people not to work and rewarding companies that ship American jobs overseas. That doesn't make any sense. And while we're on the topic of workers, Ron, I don't know that I've ever seen a candidate in my life, even the ones who are dishonest and want to raise your taxes, they'll at least tell you that they're going to cut your taxes. Kamala Harris is the first candidate I've ever seen who goes around and says she wants to raise taxes on the American people. I've never seen anything like it. And of course, if we had an honest media, she would lose in a landslide because nobody is going to vote for Kamala Harris who wants to raise their taxes. So again, we've got to tell the truth that we want working people to keep more of their money. We're going to kick Kamala Harris and her tax-raising ways out of Washington, send her back to San Francisco because that's where Kamala Harris belongs. Now, just because of Kamala's ridiculous economic policies, it's worth taking stock of how much our fellow citizens have been suffering because we're not making good decisions. The cost of living in Wisconsin is up 20% thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. The price of groceries are up 25% thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Credit card delinquencies are over 9% nationwide. That is a very, very high number thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. The average Wisconsinite has lost about $28,000 just since Kamala Harris took office. And that, by the way, may be the biggest tax increase of all, the hidden tax increase of unaffordability. Because when it costs you $28,000 just to afford the same stuff that you could have bought 3.5 years ago, that is making every single one of our citizens, rich and poor alike. It is making us poorer. It is making us a more impoverished country. It is making us less financially stable, and it's making American children, American parents, and American grandparents suffer. Let's get back to policies that are going to lower the cost of groceries, lower the cost of gasoline, and make the American dream affordable again. Let's get back to the leadership of Donald J. Trump. Now, of course, in Wisconsin and everywhere else, you can tell I've actually been here a lot because I'm starting to say Wisconsin. I'm getting better at it. But one of the biggest issues, of course, that we have is the border. And I want to talk about the border in a second, but we got to talk about its connection to some of the terrible price increases that we've seen thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Now, the media doesn't talk about this enough, if they talk about it at all, but one of the biggest problems for Wisconsinites and one of the biggest problems for our fellow Americans all across the country is that housing has gotten way too expensive. I'm the first millennial to ever serve on a major party presidential ticket, and I want people in my generation and people who are younger than I am to be able to afford the American dream of homeownership. I want, if you just got married or you're thinking about getting married, I want you to be able to raise your family in a nice and stable home. That is one of the critical components of the American dream. And too many of our young people feel like homes, and they're right, homes have gotten so expensive, rent has gotten so expensive that a lot of people can't afford it anymore. Well, let's be honest about why homes are so expensive. Number one, mortgage interest rates have gotten way too high, and that's connected to the inflation. That's connected to the fact that Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars in new spending. To get home prices more affordable, Donald J. Trump and I are going to fight to lower interest rates so that our young people and everybody else can afford to buy a home. But we've also got to make it easier to build more homes again. We've got to make it easier for our great construction firms and our great construction workers to build the homes that American citizens want to live in again. But we've also got to be honest, because it doesn't matter how many homes we build if we allow illegal aliens to live in homes that ought by right to go to American citizens, then we are never going to make home ownership affordable in the United States again. So here's the most important thing that we need to do to make sure that American citizens can afford to buy a home is make sure that American homes go to the American people, not to illegal aliens who have no right to be in this country in the first place. And that brings me, of course, to what I think is maybe the most critical issue. You know, you go back and forth. Is it the economy and the terrible inflation that we're experiencing, or is it the border? And, of course, all these things are connected. Because when Kamala Harris came into office promising, bragging that she would open up the American southern border, she didn't think once and she didn't talk once about the effect that it would have on American citizens. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that when you brought in thousands upon thousands of children into Wisconsin schools who don't even speak the local language, that it would make American children have a worse education. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that when you brought in millions of people and they go to hospital emergency rooms all over our country, that the wait times in those emergency rooms would skyrocket for American children. Kamala Harris didn't talk about the fact that the Mexican drug cartels would be arrested as far north as rural communities in Wisconsin because she rolled out the red carpet and opened the American southern border. Kamala Harris didn't talk about those problems because Kamala Harris doesn't care about those problems or the American citizens who are suffering. We got to get back to an American president who puts our interests first, and that's Donald J. Trump. We cannot keep doing this. We just got to stop doing this. It's the craziest thing that I've ever seen. Look, I'm obviously not a Democrat, but I remember when Bill Clinton was president in the 1990s, the way that Bill Clinton talked about illegal immigration, he'd beat a radical right-wing Republican in 2024. The media would call him a racist. They'd call him a xenophobe because Bill Clinton believed, criticized him on many other things, Bill Clinton believed that we ought to have a border. Donald Trump believes we ought to have a border. I think 90% of our fellow citizens believe that we ought to have a border. Why don't we have a border? Because Kamala Harris refuses to do her damn job. So let's say to Kamala Harris, you're fired, get out of the Oval Office, you're not welcome in the people's house anymore. Now, I will say, as much as it bothers me that Kamala Harris is doing a terrible job, and as much as it really bothers me that she lies about the fact that she has all the connection in the world to these policies. You watch, again, I wouldn't recommend you do it because you lose about 20 IQ points, but if you watch a Kamala Harris rally, she will stand up before the crowd and say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis affecting American citizens. On day one, we're going to make housing more affordable, and we're going to secure the southern border. And of course, anybody with an ounce of common sense is saying, day one was 1,400 days ago, Kamala. What have you been doing the whole time? So she runs away, as far away from Joe Biden as she possibly could. In fact, I think that if an interviewer asked her, have you ever seen Joe Biden, she might answer no, because even though she is the sitting vice president, she tries to pretend that she has nothing to do with the policies of the last 4 years, even though, of course, there are clips of her on camera bragging about those policies, saying that she was the last person in the room when decisions were made, casting the tie-breaking vote on these policies, and now Kamala Harris, she wants to wash her hands and say, I had nothing to do with it. Well, luckily for us, luckily for the Trump campaign, while Kamala Harris tries to run away from the Biden administration's policies because they're so unpopular, she also occasionally will open her mouth and tell the truth. And I don't know if you've seen her interview that she did with The View a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad that most of you didn't see it. Look, I will never complain about running for vice president except about this one topic. I watch Kamala Harris on The View so that you don't have to. That is the sacrifice that I take upon myself, my friends. This is a life of service I've asked for. It's not always easy. Sometimes I got to watch Kamala Harris on The View. But look, the media says she only does softball interviews. Even the friendly media says she only does softball interviews. I think she's done one genuinely tough interview. And I know we've got a lot of baseball fans in the great state of Wisconsin. And the problem with a softball interview is that she's still got to be able to hit a softball. And I don't know that Kamala Harris could hit a T-ball based on the interviews that she's given, because they asked her, what would you have done differently than Joe Biden? And remember, the whole narrative of her campaign is that she's got nothing to do with Joe Biden. And she says, in a moment of apparent honesty, nothing comes to mind. Now, I said this last night, this could very well be the slogan of the Kamala Harris campaign. Nothing comes to mind. But in a moment of rare honesty, she revealed the lie at the heart of her entire campaign. Because if you're frustrated with grocery prices, and you have every right to be, if you're frustrated with the open border, if you're frustrated with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, if you're frustrated with the fact that our schools too often indoctrinate our children instead of educating our children, if you're frustrated that you paid a lot of taxes, but you don't actually get a whole lot of good public services from those taxes that you pay, if you're frustrated with the condition of our great country, you have every right to say to Kamala Harris, we don't want you anymore. We want change. We want Donald J. Trump back in the White House. Now, I will say another moment of bipartisanship here, that I do feel sometimes bad for Governor Tim Walz, because I get to go around and defend Donald Trump's record, and he has to defend Kamala. Think about this. When I go around talking about Donald Trump's record, we don't try to hide from it. We don't try to pretend that it was somebody else's record. We're proud of Donald Trump's record because Donald Trump delivered peace and prosperity for the American people. It's very simple. Now, you can go on Donald Trump's website, donaldjtrump.com. You can see the issue papers and the policy positions. I'm happy to talk about the work we've been doing on the transition team to make sure that your government is ready to go on day one, that are going to deliver peace and prosperity. But it's not just plans and promises, because I don't know about you, and I know my colleague from Wisconsin agrees with me. I sometimes get sick of career politicians and bureaucrats talking about their plans and promises. It's nice to have a guy to vote for because he has a record. And that record is that he fought back Chinese. In Wisconsin, we care a lot about our proud tradition of American manufacturing and American craftsmanship. Donald Trump, for the first time in 40 years, said no more theft of American. Years of life, and I'd like to get back to it. I'd like to get back to common sense. I'd like to get back to peace. And I'd really like to get back to American citizens being able to afford to build a good life in this country that all of us love. But we're not going to get there unless we make Donald J. Trump the next president of the United States. So let's do everything that we can. Let's vote early. Let's vote by mail. Let's do what we have to do to get Donald J. Trump. I want to say one more thing because, again, I try to read the news and understand what's going on, and I haven't talked about this yet, but I'm going to talk about it now because I think that in the final stage of this campaign, Kamala Harris has chosen a message, and the message is not that she's going to make your grocery prices lower or your housing more affordable. The message is not that she's going to secure the southern border. Her closing message to the American people is that you all are bad people for being pissed off at what she's done to the country. That is her actual closing message of the campaign. And I was, like I said, I was in Madison Square Garden last night with the president, and we had well over 100,000 people between those inside and those outside, and they were, fired up. It was a celebration of America. You had a lot of fun at that rally. And you know what? Thank you. And you know what Kamala Harris and her team woke up this morning and decided to compare it to? They decided to compare us to literal Nazis for gathering in Madison Square Garden and celebrating the United States of America. These are the same people, of course, who call us racist for wanting to secure the southern border. They're the same people who have no plans, no ideas, and no solutions. All they have is hatred of their fellow citizens. And on November the 5th, I don't want us to just elect Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. I want us to reject Kamala Harris and a ridiculous name-calling over actual governance. And because of this, I actually decided, I Googled an image of our brave men and women almost 80 years ago storming the beaches at Normandy. And I thought to myself, who does Kamala Harris think that she's kidding? When I looked at the image of those brave young men, a lot of us, of course, knew some of those folks. Of course, we still have some World War II generations still with us, though it's dwindling by the day. But most of us probably knew somebody who was involved in World War II in some form or another. And I find it honestly kind of funny that Kamala Harris thinks that the men who stormed the beach at Omaha would want taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for illegal aliens. That's why those guys stormed the beaches at Normandy, because they wanted to open up the American southern border. That's not what they wanted at all. They wanted freedom. They wanted liberty. They wanted somebody who would protect the Constitution. How dare Kamala Harris call her fellow citizens Nazis for loving this country enough to call her a bad vice president? And that's exactly what she How dare Kamala Harris call her fellow citizens racist for not wanting their communities over parents, bad people, for wanting their children to grow up in safe neighborhoods? How dare Kamala Harris call the American people bad for wanting an economy where they can afford to buy groceries and afford to put a nice roof over the heads of their children? I want us all on November the 5th, not just to make Donald J. Trump the next president, but to reject Kamala Harris and her broken politics, which is more about attacking her fellow citizens, dividing our fellow Americans, than proposing a positive agenda for how to govern. She is a disgrace. She is endangering the life of Donald J. Trump, and we're going to send her back to California where she belongs. And with that, let's have a few questions from the media.
Hi, sir. Wyatt Williams with News 9 WAOW here in Wausau.
How you doing, Wyatt?
I'm great, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good, man.
Absolutely. Well, my question for you, if elected, what is the first thing you'll do to help Wisconsinites and other U.S. residents?
Yes, sir. Well, I think the very first, the most important, and in some ways the easiest and immediate thing that we can do when Donald J. Trump takes over, because it doesn't require an act of Congress, is to really unleash American energy once again. We want to become energy dominant because when we do that, that's going to create a America. But more importantly than that, it's the most immediate thing that we can do to lower the cost of goods, to lower those interest rates, and to start making the American dream affordable again. That's priority number one, is to start making people's lives more affordable again. That's the way in which Kamala Harris's leadership has been the most broken. The second thing that we're going to do, and it's really an important contrast between Kamala Harris, because how are we going to get this fentanyl and how are we going to get this crime out of our country unless we have a president who's willing to support our Border Patrol and enforce the border again? So while there are a lot of specific policies, from re-implementing deportations to continuing construction of the border wall to re-implementing the Remain in Mexico policy. But the basic gist of it is this: while Kamala Harris has rolled out the red carpet for illegal aliens, Donald Trump has a much different message. If you're in this country illegally, pack your bags, because in 3 months you're going back home. Next question.
Hello, Senator Vance. Dale Ryman with WSAW here in Wausau. It's kind of a double-edged question here. You guys have obviously a lot of focus on the blue states, especially here in Wisconsin, a lot of visits. What is the path to victory for the Trump-Vance campaign if you don't win Wisconsin? And the second part of that is, have you given any thought, because if you don't win, you will remain a senator, what if the Trump-Vance campaign wins the popular vote but loses the electoral vote? What kind of a path do you see changes being made after that, if any?
Well, look, first of all, we're going to win in Wisconsin. Donald Trump's going to be the president-elect of the United States. I believe that. You know, here's the thing. We can talk about the popular vote, the electoral college. To me, it's like talking about yards in a football game when we're talking about points. You don't win a football game by getting more yards than the other team. You win a football game by getting more points than the other team. And the way that our founders set up the United States Constitution is that electoral college determines the victor in the American presidential election. That's the way that it is, and that's the way that it's going to be as far as I'm concerned. But on Wisconsin in particular, look, the reason why I feel very good about Wisconsin, it's not just because some of the early vote numbers that we're seeing. It's not just because, you know, there is, I think, some real enthusiasm that we're seeing on the ground here in Wisconsin. It's that I think people in Wisconsin are people of common sense and they're fed up with the garbage. It's very simple. We've got in our coalition, think about this. We've got on the right, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador. We've got Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard on the left. Donald Trump has united all of these people, and of course there's disagreement between all 5 of the people that I just named, and yet what unites us is a love of the United States of America and a recognition that common sense needs to be brought back in the United States government. And so I'd say, look, we have a lot of paths. We have many, many paths, in fact, to victory, and I feel very good about where we are, but, you know, knock on wood because I'm a little superstitious. But I think the path that is actually going to be the one that we walk is going to have us winning Wisconsin, winning Michigan, winning Pennsylvania, and really, really taking this country back in a big way. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Senator Torian Small with CBS News again. Last night, obviously Speaker Johnson was there at Madison Square Garden. Former President Trump looked at him and said 2 policy proposals, one on addressing immigration with mass deportation through the Alien Enemies Act. The other one was a proposal to ban flag burning. Your response to that, especially considering the latter would be a breach of free speech, which you've talked about before.
Well, I think that we can all recognize that there are important national symbols that are worth protecting, and I think the American flag is a national symbol that's worth protecting. Look, the censorship that I'm worried about is not somebody not being able to burn a flag at a protest rally, which, by the way, can sometimes be dangerous. It's not just burning a flag at an American protest rally. The censorship that I really worry about is when the federal government or when big technology companies tell the people in this hangar that they're not allowed to speak their mind according to their wishes. That is the censorship that is actually a threat in the United States of America. So obviously we'd have to see what that legislation looked like. I'm sure that the courts would get a say because somebody would file a lawsuit. But the censorship that we should be most worried about, it's not just the official censorship coming from the government, but it's this thing that I think a lot of us feel, maybe not in this room, but I think a lot of our fellow Americans feel this idea that you're not allowed to speak openly about your values, about your faith, about what you believe, and about who you're ultimately going to vote for. And what I'd ask every person in this room to remember is that cowardice is contagious, but courage is contagious too. And what I see... What I see, you know, when I see a guy like Elon Musk, who I've known Elon for a little while. Elon was a center-left Clinton Democrat even 5 years ago, and now he's going around doing MAGA rallies with Donald J. Trump. You know what Elon Musk was sick of? Elon Musk was sick of being told what to say and what to think in the United States of America. We believe in the First Amendment, and I think... And I think that's something we really have to take back. Don't let somebody make you feel bad, or don't let somebody make you feel ashamed because you disagree with them on a particular issue. Get informed, of course, get educated, have a conversation. America was built around the idea that American citizens could have conversations with one another, even when, maybe especially when we disagree with one another. And by the way, let me make one final point about that, and then I'll take one final question. Something that I've seen in my own life, and I've seen it with my... By the way, my beautiful wife is here. Give it up for Usha. Usha, I love you, honey. It's been really fun to do this, but it's been especially fun to do it with my best friend by my side the whole way. So we're having a good time. But Well, something I've seen in her life, something I've seen certainly in my life, is way too many friendships have been destroyed over politics. And we got to stop doing that. And I will say, obviously I'm a little biased. I know very few Republicans, though I do know some, I know very few Republicans who would say, I'm not going to be your friend anymore, or I'm not going to invite a family member over to Thanksgiving over politics. I know way too many Americans on the other side of the aisle who are actually destroying family relationships and friendships over politics. My simple advice is stop doing that. It's way, way too important. Family and friendship is way too important to lose and to cast aside over stupid things. One more question.
Hey there, Senator Alec Hernandez with NBC News. Speaking of Madison Square Garden, last night during the pre-program, a comedian made several racist jokes that the campaign has since distanced itself from. Another speaker called Kamala Harris the Antichrist. Another called her the devil. You've talked before about former President Trump being able to unite the country. I'm curious, as we are entering this last stretch of campaigning this final week, is that the right tone to have started this final 8 days with?
Well, first of all, I think that we've got to focus, Alec, I appreciate the question, but I think that we as a country, and I think that includes the press, it includes the Kamala Harris campaign, and it certainly includes our campaign, the way that we unite the country is to talk about the issues the American people care the most about. And what we're doing over the next 8 days is we're focused, laser focused, on how we're going to close the border, how we're going to make American lives more affordable again, how we're going to bring down the cost of housing. That's what we should be talking. I think a lot of Americans are sick of the distractions and sick of the BS. They want our candidates to talk about how they're going to solve the people's problems. And that's what we ought to do. Now, I've heard about the joke. I haven't actually seen the joke that you mentioned, but I think that it's telling that Kamala Harris's closing message is essentially that all of Donald Trump's voters are Nazis and you should get really pissed off about a comedian telling a joke. That is not the message of a winning campaign. And most importantly, it's not the message of a person who's fit to be the President of the United States of America. And my own view on this is, look, again, I haven't seen the joke. Maybe it's a stupid racist joke, as you said. Maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke. But I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America. I'm so over it. I mean, somebody sent me a couple days ago, and they were kind of pissed off about it. Maybe it was yesterday, of this comedian George Lopez, who had made a joke at a Kamala Harris rally. And he basically, like, the point was, he was trying to make a joke. It was against Mexicans, and I forget the exact context. But if you wanted to look at it a particular way, you could say that was a racist joke. And this person, in fact, was encouraging me to sort of, blow this up and make this about how Kamala Harris doesn't respect Latinos. And my response was, can we all just take a chill pill and take a joke from time to time? This is ridiculous. Our country was built by frontiersmen who conquered the wilderness. We're not going to restore the greatness of American civilization if we get offended at every little thing. Let's have a sense of humor, and let's have a little fun, and let's go win in 8 days. God bless you all. Thank you.